Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another great week of the Fixate Binge Podcast. I'm your host, your weekly host, Joe. I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad that you've tuned back into this podcast. I enjoy doing this podcast, as I hope you can tell, and I enjoy so many of our guests that come on. If this is your first visit to the Fixate Binge Podcast, you owe it to yourself to go back a few episodes, even last week's episode. Last week's episode was to commemorate the 200th episode of this weekly podcast. So go ahead and do some math there. We've been going strong here for about 4 years. There's not very often that we miss weeks when it comes to this weekly podcast. So I've had a great time. My guest last week joined us from London, England. His name is Sam Troughton. That may not be a name that is a household name here in the States, but you've certainly seen some of Sam's work on the small screen and the big screen. He was in Alien vs. Predator. He got killed by one of those face huggers. He was in the acclaimed HBO TV series Chernobyl. He played one of the nuclear scientists who was there when the Chernobyl activator went kaput. He is also in a lot of other TV shows, several Netflix shows, Black Doves with Keira Knightley and Ben Whishaw. He was in Napoleon with Joaquin Phoenix, directed by Ridley Scott. He's been in Vera Drake by acclaimed British director Mike Leigh, and he was also in David Fincher's Mank, starring Gary Oldman, that was up for all these Oscars, and Sam had a very memorable speaking part playing John Houseman in the film. So it was a great prestige-type guest. Sam is an old buddy of mine. We go back, my goodness, about 20 years, if I'm thinking correctly. We go back about 20 years. I've enjoyed Sam's work. He's been a colleague and a friend, and I have just really enjoyed seeing his career take off in leaps and bounds on the big screen. And I look forward to when I hear that he's back on the stage doing more Shakespeare, because that is how I first encountered Sam. Great guest. You owe it to yourself. Press pause on this one, man. Go back and listen to last week's episode. My special co-host guest for that episode was Deontay Jenkins, who, if you are not following Deontay Jenkins on any of your socials, just subscribe to his YouTube channel, Deontay Jenkins. He does fantastic cinematic breakdowns. He's a filmmaker and a cinematographer in his own right, and you owe it to yourself to at least peruse what he brings to the table when it comes to creating film, but also explaining film. Deontay also has a background in education as well, because he teaches at the college there in DC. I'm not sure which college it is, but I believe he teaches some courses on screenwriting and cinematography and what makes for a good film. So if you just want to learn something educational with some very interesting and intriguing facts about what makes good film, you owe it to yourself to check out Deontay's YouTube channel, but he also has a great TikTok channel as well. And he was my co-host for last week's episode with Sam. And again, I can't stop bragging about it, I guess. It's a 200th episode, and I'm so glad to have commemorated that and celebrated that with all of you this last week. This week's episode, we have to talk about the 2026 Oscars. I got some things wrong. I did. I got some things wrong. I got some things right. There were a couple risky predictions I made that I was surprised I got right. I kind of went out on a limb. I just had a feeling. It was just a hunch that the Oscar voters might bend or trend one way or another, and I sometimes I got wrong, but a few surprises there, and I want to talk to you, of course, about some of those surprises. I had intended to make this episode a post-Oscars, and we're going to talk about the Oscars, but I also wanted to talk about two films that I saw this weekend, and that is Ready or Not 2, and then Project Hail Mary with Ryan Gosling. I saw the Project Hail Mary with Ryan Gosling yesterday with my entire family. We all went as a family, and each of us enjoyed it. And I want you to consider, I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 22-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter. And then there's my wife and I. So we're spread out. Almost none of us can agree on what makes a good film. were all kind of all over the map. But the fact that Project Hail Mary appealed to each of us and connected with each of us is, I think, the film's tremendous charm. I have not written my Letterboxd review for this film yet, which I'll explain why in just a second. I have not written it yet. I'm going to tell you right now, I am giving it 5 stars. It is the best film I've seen this year so far. There have been a couple other great films that have released this year, and I've enjoyed them, but Project Hail Mary is everything that cinema has to be about. It's about connecting with your audience. It's about great story writing, an interesting concept, and it's wonderful. Honestly, I know it's very, very early days, but I wouldn't be disappointed to see Project Hail Mary at least crack the top 10 Best Picture nominees for the 2027 Academy Awards next year. I wouldn't be shocked. It has all the elements that F1 had in terms of making a good, enjoyable film that has cross appeal. And it has other elements that make for what a good picture has to be. Compelling characters, great writing, wonderful editing, great mise-en-scene. Just everything was firing on all cylinders for this film. And I think they've set the bar for the movie season. And we're not even in the summer movie season yet, of course. So you owe it to yourself to see Project Hail Mary on the big screen. It opened just a couple days ago. I want to hear from you what you made of the film. And the reason why I'm not going to talk about Project Hail Mary in this episode is because, one, I think the film deserves a wider discussion because it was just so full of everything. It had so much. But also because something happened in Hollywood this week. And I want to get into that in just a minute. The other film that I watched this weekend was Ready or Not 2. And I felt that film doesn't deserve a very long discussion from my side because I felt that it was very much in the spirit of the first film, but it didn't break new ground necessarily in ways that I wanted it to from the first film. And so the first film was good. It was an interesting concept, and I liked it, and it had a couple twists and surprises at the end, but I felt like the second film, it had a better cast in the second film, and it just continued on from the events of the first film. My review that I wrote for Letterboxd, I won't read that here, was this is very similar in the narrative style or the story style, as it were, of the John Carpenter's Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, because, of course, at the end of Halloween 1, Jamie Curtis's character is injured and has to go to the hospital, and that's how it ends in part 1. And then part 2 picks up directly after the events of part 1. And so now she's in the hospital, and Michael Myers is coming for Laurie Strode. Well, that's a little bit how the second film, Ready or Not 2, Here I Come, how that picks up. It picks up right after the events of the first film, and our main character is going to the hospital to lick her wounds, as it were. Well, as bad luck would have it, there is more shenanigans going on with these blue-blooded families that are all about prestige and murder and hunting people down to please a darker power. And so it's a big, interesting retread of the first film. I didn't hate it. I found it somewhat entertaining. It was nice to see Sarah Michelle Gellar back on the big screen. She's great, of course, from her Buffy the Vampire days. I really liked seeing Sean Hatosy, I'm not sure how you pronounce that last name, from The Pit. I thought his character, and I hope this is not a spoiler, it shouldn't be because it's certainly hinted out in the trailer, his character is going to be kind of hard to like when I finally do sit down to watch The Pit, because he's beloved on The Pit on HBO, the TV series, and his character was just so... I hated his character. He did a great job as this bad guy, but you just hate him. And so I'm going to try and suspend reality a little bit or suspend my belief a little bit when I watch him on The Pit. And by the way, I mean, I don't have anything else to say about Ready or Not 2. If you loved the first film, I don't think you're going to hate the second film. I question whether or not the second film was completely necessary. The only thing I thought that they brought that changed the dynamic from the first film was that this was a film about two estranged sisters patching their relationship up while being pursued by a bunch of killers. So in that vein, I think it's enjoyable. It delivers a lot of great kills, and that's fine. It has kind of a surprise-esque third act or final act, and so for that reason, I gave it 3 stars out of the 5. I would have given it 2.5 stars, but for the fact that it introduced a new character, the sister, the estranged sister, and the final act wasn't exactly completely disappointing. So, yeah, it's kind of a meh film. If it's your cup of tea, enjoy it. If it's not, stream it. Do you have to pay good money to see it on the big screen? I don't think you do. You don't. You don't. Now, in contrast, when it comes to Project Hail Mary, absolutely it's worth the price of admission. It absolutely is. The biggest screen possible. If you can see it on IMAX. And my deep pockets were not that deep for a family of 5 to buy IMAX tickets. My goodness. We saw it on the big screen nonetheless at AMC, but we could not afford, I think, well, we were trying to spend our money on other things. But if you can see it on the biggest screen possible, do it. You owe it to yourself. Seeing this film on the small screen is almost an insult to the grandeur and the effort made to bring something larger than life to the big screen. You owe it to yourself to see it. So it absolutely is worth the price of admission. But like I keep hinting at and keep circling back and then hinting and then circling back, something happened in Hollywood this week, because the plan was to talk about these 2 films that I saw this weekend and then talk about the Oscars. And we're going to get into the Oscars in just a minute. But then I was going to talk more in depth about Project Mary, because I think that is going to be a much richer conversation. But something happened in Hollywood this week, something surprising, something that kind of affected me personally. And that was the death of Chuck Norris. Now, my closest friends and family, they will know my personal connection to Chuck Norris. It's weird. It was a weird phase in my life. It happened my senior year of high school, and it's odd, but I was in a film with Chuck Norris. It was filmed during the Thanksgiving break in 1991. It was edited and post-production and all that throughout 1992, and it hit the big screens in late 1993, it's what I want to say. And the film I'm talking about, of course, is SIDEKICKS. And this is my only real connection with Chuck Norris. I want to talk a little bit about this. Chuck Norris died at 86. He was born in 1940, and he had such a great, interesting career. I mean, he was a military vet. He got into American karate. He ended up being in, Enter the Dragon. He had that iconic showdown with Bruce Lee at the Roman Coliseum. I mean, that's cinema, if you ask me. That's martial arts cinema. This was, of course, put Chuck Norris on the map. And then he began making a lot of American action films in the late 70s and throughout the early to mid 80s. He was pretty active. Chuck Norris movies were he was really making these action-packed films at a time when, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger were making these action-packed films. He was part of that group. And so it was kind of nice to see Sylvester Stallone bring back the old gang from the 80s for a cameo or a bit part in one of his Expendables films, which is pretty much the last time I saw Chuck Norris act on the big screen. But my personal connection with Chuck, of course, was my theater teacher stumbled upon an ad in the Houston Chronicle, which is a newspaper in Houston, Texas, of a film that was going to be made. And it was going to be a film about it was trying to cash in on the Karate Kid craze. This was early 90s, so the Karate Kid sequels were still being made, Karate Kid 3 and things like that. And there was still an audience for it. And so, of course, there were going to be some knockoffs or people trying to appeal to the same demographic that made those Karate Kid films so popular. And lest we forget, the first Karate Kid film, Pat Morita, the late Pat Morita, Mr. Miyagi, he got an Academy Award nomination for that. So it wasn't just a family-pleasing film in the mid-'80s. It was a family-pleasing film that came out to some acclaim. And it kickstarted this interest in how do we make wholesome martial arts films for families, family-friendly, or martial arts films with a moral, because there's an adult audience for the Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. There's an adult audience, of course, for the more adult themed Bruce Lee films, or even some of those Jackie Chan films coming out of China at the time, and of course Chuck Norris films. But what about a film that appealed to the wider demographic that were going to the movies as families? And that, of course, was the Karate Kid craze. And then Chuck Norris decided he would get in on that, soften his image a little bit, because previous to that, Chuck Norris was making a lot of rated R movies, killing guys in very interesting ways around the world. And those are all great films. They're just leave your brain in the lobby, leave your brain outside of your body, and just enjoy them, right? So my theater teacher, I'm getting off track here a little bit. It's almost like I'm used to talking to myself for a podcast, but my theater teacher stumbles across this article in the Houston Chronicle asking for extras for an upcoming Chuck Norris film that will be filming in the greater Houston area. And they were looking for high school aged extras. And so he brought it to our theater arts class. And so myself and about 4 other people from my theater arts class, we showed up on a Saturday at a hotel in Houston. I can't remember which one. I think it was a Hilton hotel. And we fill out a brief application, just, name, date, birth date, specifications, just the basics, weight and height and everything else. And they took a Polaroid of us. And that was it. There were no lines to read. So we were just, showing up to see if we would be suitable as extras. And I didn't think of anything of it for a few months. And then phone calls came through. The casting director was like, okay, you have been selected to be in the film, and we want to film during the Thanksgiving break of 1991. And we're going to be filming at a high school in the greater Houston area, literally downtown Houston, called Lamar High School. And so while everybody else was watching football and eating leftover turkey, me and my 3 or 4 theater students, fellow colleagues, we were extras on a Chuck Norris movie called SIDEKICKS, starring Richard Mall, the late Jonathan Brandis, and my goodness, I can't remember her name, Winnie Cooper from the Wonder Years. I can't remember her name. She's super smart. She's got like degrees from mathematics from MIT, but you know who I'm talking about, Winnie Cooper. She was in it. And so we were there. And then it became pretty obvious that we were a little more than extras, rather. I think I got conscripted, or I got kind of lumped in with the bullies group of friends that would pick on Jonathan Brandis's character. And then, of course, Jonathan Brandis's character, if you've seen the movie SIDEKICKS, by the way, it's really corny, but if you've seen the movie SIDEKICKS, you have a character played by Jonathan Brandis who is bullied by a group of high schoolers, and he's just a loner. He's everything that makes you sympathetic. Bullying is a horrible, horrible thing. And here he was being bullied by a kid and his group of droogs, his group of thugs, and I was one of those thug kids. And when he would get picked on, he would imagine that Chuck Norris would fight alongside him, that Chuck Norris would recreate some of his most famous scenes from his previous action film career, and Jonathan Brandis would be placed in some of those action scenes as Chuck Norris's, wait for it, it's coming, sidekick in some of those action films. And so it was kind of a love letter to Chuck Norris film fans. It was really self-referential to everything Chuck Norris had done. And not surprisingly, Chuck Norris's brother, Aaron Norris, was directing the film. He's a bit of a director in his own right, but he's pretty much made his career off of directing his brother Chuck in many things. And then he would go on, of course, to make Walker, Texas Ranger and have a significant impact on that series. But I got cast as, like I said, one of the bad guys. I had a couple close-ups. Night Court's Richard Mall, who passed away a couple years ago, but Richard Mall, very tall, imposing guy. He played the PE teacher. So if you look at some of those gym scenes, I'm in those gym scenes. I'm standing next to the actress, Winnie Cooper, whatever. I'm the one mocking Jonathan Brandis as he's trying to do the rope climb in gym class. And then Chuck Norris magically appears next to him, encouraging him, "Come on, Barry." That's his character's name. "You can do it, Barry. You can make it." And of course, Jonathan Brandis never actually climbed the rope. It was a stunt double that looked a lot like him. Did all the hard work. But My experience working with Chuck Norris it was the first big celebrity experience I had ever had. I had never been in the presence of a celebrity. And if you were ever going to have a first experience with a celebrity, Chuck Norris was one of the best celebrities to have that experience with, because he immediately removed any of the anxiety out of the room. In between scenes, he would come over to us, to the extras, and he would talk to us. And we would hang on his every word. He would come over, he says, "Hi, I'm Chuck." And the first thing I noticed was how short he was. He was like 5'7", 5'8". He was such a nice guy, firm handshake, look you right in the eye. You know, a lot of these actors, and I include Richard Mall, he would go to his trailer in between takes. He did not socialize with anybody. And the actress that plays Winnie Cooper, I can't remember her name. I'm going to remember her name after this podcast, by the way. She too was a little bit, let me go to my trailer in between scenes. I don't need to hang out with the extras. And I'm not saying she's arrogant. And Jonathan Brandis as well. But I think Jonathan Brandis, as we now know, he was fighting certain demons of his own. So, these people aren't very extroverted. And I expected actors of this caliber to be extremely extroverted and very chatty, but they're actually quite private. But Chuck, he could be very private, and yet he was so warm. That was the thing that came across more than anything else, was how genuinely warm he was. Like, he took an interest in each of us being there. None of us had ever been in a film before. We were all terrified and exhilarated at the same time because we're having this wonderful experience. And Chuck was just a very calming influence. He's extremely soothing. He'd look you in the eye, he'd shake your hand, he'd flash you that typical Chuck Norris smile. And the reason that Chuck said he wanted to get into this film and why he wanted to be a part of it is because he was really interested in outreach for helping youth of America be more physically fit and more physically active. And he believed that making these kinds of movies that were more family friendly versus his action career was going to actually increase interest in families enrolling their kids in martial arts or some sort of physical activity. I think Chuck even went so far as to mention that he was part of the president's physical fitness council. I know that Arnold Schwarzenegger did that for either Reagan or George Bush Sr., but he was really committed to helping kids have positive role models, positive influences, and that's what this film was all about. If you're from the Houston area or you know anything about the great Mattress Mac, who opened up his furniture store during the Great Houston Floods years ago, in sharp contrast to Joel Osteen, who closed his church when people were homeless from the floods. But Mattress Mac, Google him, great guy, great rags to riches story, great redemption story. He was producing this film, and he very much is community minded, especially in Houston. So this was a film with a lot of great intentions. It came off very corny. I now can appreciate that it has achieved cult status. I still run into people and they love it. I grew up on that film. Oh my gosh, you were in that movie? No way. Who were you? And if you really want to know who I was, I don't look anything like I did then, of course. I wore a baseball hat. I would wear a baseball hat, a red baseball hat. And I became featured as a result of an interaction. I became really good friends with and I can't remember his name, of course, but with the main bully kid. And I would crack jokes and interact in between takes. And Aaron Norris saw an interaction that I had with the lead actor that was playing the bad guy in between takes. And he said, "You know what you guys just did up there, I want you to recreate that moment for this new scene I'm going to do." And I was like, no way. And then I had one of the PAs come up to me and say, because you're going to be featured, we will need to put you in the cast list. And that's important because I got an acting agent because of this. So that was a great experience for me. It has nothing to do with Chuck in that moment, but there was a classroom scene where the teacher's asking questions about Shakespeare, whatever, and the teacher looks up into the student seating area and sees the bad kid. His name was Cellini. How's that? His name was Cellini, and I was talking to Cellini. We were sharing a personal joke, so we recreated that moment. And so when the teacher called on the bad kid, Cellini, who hadn't been listening, he looked stupid. And Jonathan Brandis raised his hand. Teacher called on Jonathan Brandis, and Jonathan Brandis got the answer right. And that made Cellini pissed off because, Barry looked smart, and Cellini looked stupid. And more importantly, Barry impressed Winnie Cooper's character, and I think Cellini had the hots for her. But I was the guy that was telling Cellini the bad joke that distracted him. So if you really want to see my one big moment of fame, that's the moment as a featured extra. And of course, featured means that you factor prominently in some of the scenes throughout the film. You're not just scenery with the rest of the extras in a park or at the zoo or something. So that was my experience. And I don't have much more to say except in between scenes, I held Julia Nixon Soule's books. She's a teacher in the film. She was in Rambo 2. There was there was in between scenes. We were eating, because I was featured, I got to eat with the regular actors at one point, and I was dishing up at the salad bar. I was dishing up, and I look over, and the guy filling his plate, standing at my elbow, right next to me, waiting for me to put the spoon back down so he could dish up, was Beau Bridges. And I looked at him and I said, You're Beau Bridges. And he went, Yes, I am. And I was starstruck, and that was the end of that interaction. Joe Piscopo's in the film. Funny guy. He was great. I didn't really get to interact with him much. I don't have any scenes with him. But again, going back to Chuck Norris, he was the moving factor for me. It was my first, like I said, experience with an actual celebrity. I really enjoyed Chuck's presence on the film. Such a humble guy. Now, I'm not going to talk about Chuck's politics. I'm not going to talk about the personal convictions he had. I believe we need to do a little bit hard. I think we need to make the effort of separating people from their politics as much as we can. I have a problem lensing people through their politics all the time. I think we need to take a step back. I don't like Sylvester Stallone's politics, but I can appreciate a good Sylvester Stallone film. That doesn't mean I don't like Sylvester Stallone's politics now, so I'm going to personally boycott watching Rocky reruns or Copland or any of these other films that he's been in. No, I'm not going to do that. Chuck was just a good human being, and I have good human beings in my personal family, people I love. I don't agree with their politics, but you know what? I don't believe our good Lord is going to look at people's political feelings and make character judgments on everything they've ever done in their life. So we're going to just put that off to the side. Chuck was a nice guy. He made a great impression on me. I got an acting agent. Yes, I did get an audition from that acting agent to be in a television pilot with Chuck Norris because Aaron Norris was directing the pilot, and Aaron Norris remembered me from SIDEKICKS, the film he directed with his brother Chuck. So I auditioned for the pilot of a new TV series starring Chuck Norris called Walker, Texas Ranger. And unfortunately, my character was written out of the pilot. My character's name was Mojo. So that was the last time I ever got to work with Chuck Norris, but I almost got to work with Chuck Norris in a wider capacity. And by the way, Mojo was going to be an inner city kid living in the greater Houston area, and Chuck would do outreach. He was kind of like an older brother, father figure to Mojo. Mojo was like a street smarts kid, living in juvie, and Chuck would do outreach, and he would volunteer at the juvenile hall, and eventually my character would look up to Chuck as like a father figure, and that was all part of the good guy myth that they were going to create around Walker, Texas Ranger. But it was not to be. They wrote my character out of the pilot, and now you'll just have to take my word for it. But yes, I very much was almost in Walker, Texas Ranger, and then of course the rest would have been history. I have a feeling if I had been in Walker, Texas Ranger, this podcast would be a lot more successful, because that's how it is for former actors or actors that whose light has dimmed in Hollywood. So they start a podcast and they have a new lease on life. But I'm not one of those people, unfortunately. Anyway, that's my Chuck Norris personal experience. Rest in peace. My experience with Chuck Norris predates all those hilarious Chuck Norris jokes and memes that have gone all over the world. And I'm so glad that Chuck leaned into it and embraced it and had some fun, much the same way that Leonard Nimoy leaned into and finally embraced that he was going to be Spock forever. Chuck finally leaned into and accepted these larger-than-life silly jokes about me. Yes, my tears can cure cancer. No, I've never cried before. These types of things. I'm glad he leaned into it and had fun with it, and we'll miss him. But the memes will live on, and I believe that no true legend ever dies. So we will continue to tip our hat to the great man himself, a great American, a decent human being, a very kind and thoughtful man. So rest in peace, Chuck. I miss you. Your legacy remains. Thank you. Now, I want to briefly talk a little bit about the 2026 Oscars. I got some memorable ones wrong. Now, if you go back several weeks, you can listen to the episode I had with my co-host from DC, Deontay Jenkins, who is phenomenal at predicting where the Oscars will land. He's really, really good at it. I haven't exactly tallied up what he got wrong at this Oscars, but there were some surprises. I will tell you really quickly what I got right, okay? So I got right Best Picture. I felt because of the political climate and the way things were and the fact that it just hasn't, we needed, given the field, the other choices, I felt like One Battle After Another by Paul Thomas Anderson was going to be the winner. But I felt that way because his nomination as Best Director, I think that was a lock. Paul Thomas Anderson has been nominated for Best Director so many times, and he's never won it. And here he is, continually putting out quality material. How long is Hollywood going to continue to pass him over? And so I felt like Best Director was a lock. But I also felt like if you're locked in as Best Director, then I think that your film should win Best Picture. And there are examples where the film wins Best Picture and the director doesn't, which is weird. It is weird to me, and I still haven't heard a very good explanation of how a director cannot get nominated, even sometimes not even nominated as a Best Director, but their film can get nominated for Best Picture. I still haven't heard a very convincing argument of how you can have that. But anyway, because I felt like he was such a lock as Best Director, I felt like his film would win. And it's a crowded field. There were 10 films, and I'm kind of glad the Oscars in the last few years have decided to go with this 10 film category, because that definitely opens it up. And this is, again, why I think Project Hail Mary might be able to crack the top 10 for 2027's Oscars, because it's that good. It's that good. Now, for Best Director, Best Picture, of course, I got those right. For Best Actress, I think everyone got that one right. It was Jessie Buckley for Hamnet. She was phenomenal. I'm not saying that she crushed the field. Rose Byrne was very good, and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. And I didn't. But I think Emma Stone's won 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress already, and she was nominated again by a director that she's been in multiple films already, Yorgos Lanthimos in Begonia. And so I kind of felt like, no, I think you give it to Jessie Buckley. She's the clear winner in that category, and she was, of course. Now, Best Actor, you could have asked me 3 weeks ago who I thought would win it, and I'd have given you a different name. But there was something that happened since the BAFTAs in England. I felt like it's Michael B. Jordan. There was just some feeling. I just felt like he was the one. And I know he didn't win Best Actor at the BAFTAs, but there was just a vibe, a feeling that we were leaning towards Sinners getting some love at the Oscars. And so I felt like, you know what? Michael B. Jordan did great. He played 2 characters, and Sinners was an unpretentious film in that it released around this time last year. It didn't release during the awards season. It was kind of Ryan Coogler's way of saying, I think I've made a great film, and I don't think I need to try and muscle my way into releasing it around Thanksgiving or Christmas time as an overt attempt to try and have it considered for Oscars. I think just releasing it, and if it's a great film, people will be talking about it until it's Oscar season. And he made a gamble, and it paid off. Michael B. Jordan was fantastic, and Sinners was a great film. I loved it, and I was so happy to see him win Best Actor. Now, this is where I went off the rails a little bit. I really believed that Stellan Skarsgård deserved the Best Supporting Actor, mostly because I have a bias. I love Stellan Skarsgård in everything from Good Will Hunting to Andor season 1 and 2 for Disney Plus. I think Stellan Skarsgård is long overdue for an Oscar, but it was not to be. And they ended up picking, of course, Sean Penn, who did great. He did great, but of course, Sean Penn didn't even show up. And he was in Ukraine with Zelensky, which I think that's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting? The other one I got wrong was also the Best Supporting Actress. I really believed it would be Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another, mostly because, and I think Deontay may have felt the same way too, because Teyana Taylor carried the first 30 minutes of One Battle After Another, acting opposite of DiCaprio, and I thought she more than held her own. The first 30 minutes of One Battle After Another, it's all Teyana Taylor's character. And I thought that was enough, but it was not. And again, I'm not disappointed to see who won. Amy Madigan for Weapons? Are you kidding me? That is the first supporting actress Oscar win for a horror film since Ruth Gordon won for 1970's Rosemary's Baby. So that is shocking. That's amazing. I've talked in previous podcasts about how horror films are making a comeback. We're having a renaissance of horror films. And when you see the Academy and people making these horror films are being critically acclaimed, whether it's Jordan Peele's for Get Out or Weapons or whatever it may be, I'm so glad to see that horror is getting its moment in Hollywood. And I hope it sustains itself, because it's still a very satisfying genre. And if you listen to this podcast, you know that I love horror films. When done right, I love them, and I love to watch them. So that was great. For Best Adapted Screenplay, I got it right. One Battle After Another. It was adapted from Thomas Pynchon's novel from the early 90s. I knew that, and I was very impressed how they adapted it and put some in that adaptation, transported it to current events, which I thought was very satisfying, very, very interesting and satisfying. But the Best Original Screenplay, I got wrong. I went with Marty Supreme, and it ended up being Sinners. So that's on me. Got that wrong. I got Best International Feature correct. I thought it should be Sentimental Value, mostly because Sentimental Value was nominated in Best Picture category, and I thought it won't win. It won't win. I think One Battle After Another is the clear winner. But because it won't win, they're going to show it some love for the Best International Feature. So I was right. That ended up winning, even though there were some great films in that category. Best Documentary Feature, I thought Mr. Nobody versus Putin, mostly because I hadn't seen it, but I thought, you know what? The more we know about what's going on in Russia and the clear and present danger that Vladimir Putin is to the destabilization of the world, the better. So I picked it for those reasons. Just a vibe. Best Cinematography, I picked One Battle After Another, but I was wrong. And again, I was very happy to be wrong, because this made Academy Awards history. It was Sinners, and the cinematographer, Autumn Durold Arkapaw, I don't know if I'm saying that middle name correctly, she is the first female cinematographer to win in Academy Awards history. That's 98 years, so nearly 100 years, we have never had a female cinematographer win in that category. That was a first. That was fantastic. I loved seeing it. For Best Editing, I picked F1. I just thought the editing is what makes that film. There's two technical things that make F1 for me, and that was sound and editing. Now, it did win for sound, but I also felt that the editing is so necessary to F1 even being a good picture. And of course, F1 was nominated in the Best Picture category, but I was wrong. Best Editing went to One Battle After Another. And maybe I need to watch that film again. Maybe I need to watch it again, and I think I will. Best Original Song was Golden by K-Pop Demon Hunters. I picked that mostly because it's so ubiquitous in my house. So my youngest daughter is a big K-Pop Demon Hunter fan. So that just seemed like the right one. But had it not won, I would have been very happy to see I Lied to You by Sinners. But I picked K-Pop Demon Hunters Golden. That's what won. Best costume designer, I thought Frankenstein would win it. It did. I wasn't wrong there. Best casting, I thought at first I was going to go with Marty Supreme, mostly because the casting was so eclectic. But then I had a really rough taste in my mouth by one of the actors in Marty Supreme. He's that douchebag that's on Shark Tank. I can't stand him. He's a Canadian billionaire. He's so cloying and annoying, and he's a massive Trump supporter. And I'm thinking that because of that, they did not go with the best casting Oscar in that category. So I ended up picking One Battle After Another, mostly because of Chase Infinity's debut. She was literally plucked out of obscurity, never been in anything before. And the casting director saw something in her, cast her, and she was such a delight. And so they went with that. That's what won. I think that was the right call. The best original score, I went with One Battle After Another by Johnny Greenwood, who I love. I love Johnny Greenwood's scores. But they went with Sinners by Ludwig Göransson. And that was a bit of a surprise for me, not because it wasn't good, but because Ludwig Göransson already had 2 Oscars in this category. Now this one's his 3rd. He's had 3. So that's impressive to me. Anyway, and hairstyling, I went with Frankenstein. Best production design, I went with Frankenstein. Again, those both won. Best visual effects, I remember saying to my daughter as they announced that category during the broadcast, she said, it's not going to be Avatar. I go, I'll bet you it will win, mostly because James Cameron knows everybody in the visual effects department in Hollywood. He has literally put so many of them to work. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of visual effects artists have worked on his Avatar films. He's connected. They're going to probably show him some love. And they did. They gave him Best Visual Effects Oscar, and that's why I went with that. And again, as I alluded earlier, Best Sound went to F1. F1 really was about that signature sound of those F1 cars. I didn't bother making any predictions for the best live action short, the best animated short, or the best documentary short. I'm not even going to tell you who won because I didn't even make any predictions because I didn't see anything in either of those 3 categories. But needless to say, I got a lot of things right, and I got a few things that were, in the upper echelon of recognizable categories. I got them wrong. So that's the thing about the Academy Awards. They will surprise you. I don't think anybody ever guesses all of them correctly. And if they do year after year, then they need to start betting and making some money off of it because it's a skill and a talent. Anyway, I want to leave you here. I've enjoyed talking to you about Chuck Norris, the great Chuck Norris. May he rest in peace. I've enjoyed talking to you about what's coming out, what's out now, what you should see, what's worth your time. I will be writing my review on Project Hail Mary, and I think next week's episode, I'm going to do a deeper dive because the film is so rich in meaning and themes that it deserves a wider discussion. Now, whether or not I discuss that by myself or with someone that wants to come on, I will leave that up to chance. But until next week, I hope you guys are healthy and happy. I hope you're staying cool. If you're living in the Southwest, it's pretty hot outside, so take it easy. We're going through some very strange, inclement weather. So I hope that you put on a lot of sunscreen or do your best to stay outdoors. We have an electric company out here in California, at Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, which service tens of millions. It's the largest utility company in America, simply because of the density of population in California. Anytime you get a heat wave in March, in my mind's eye, I imagine them all uncorking champagne. They're all going to make great money, hitting their sales quotas or their target, their quotients, whatever. So that's unfortunate. I normally crank the AC on during the summer, but here I am cranking it on in the spring, early spring too. So that's unfortunate. That will definitely dip into my ability to go to the movies as often as I like with my family. What a shame. There's some great movies coming out. Anyway, I hope you're healthy and happy. Like I said earlier, I hope you're looking after yourself, and I hope you surround yourself with positive influences. And I hope you take a serious look at the influences in your life and decide, are they helping you or hindering you? And if they're hindering you, I encourage you to recognize that and distance yourself, right? and start replacing, because unfortunately, when you remove destructive or negative influences in your life, it can leave a void. And those voids can sometimes be filled with even more destructive things. So if you're trying to take inventory of your personal life and you're trying to remove destructive or negative influences in your personal life, I urge you to fill those voids, those empty spaces, with positive reinforcement, okay? And that can be exercise, that can be a new friendship, that can be any number of things, but please fill it with something that's worth your time, that helps you feel better about who you are. We all count, we all have value. Let's try and find common ground with one another. And I leave that with you, and I'll see you next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.